back to another chill chat conversation. Today we're going to be talking about the word approach. I was actually in a conversation with some ladies, and what I like to do sometimes, at random times, I like to just give a word, and I go and I just discuss the word, and whatever comes to mind within the group of people that I'm with, we just have a conversation literally about the word. And the word that we were talking about recently was approach. And it was funny because the person who had drawn the card, she was like, I don't know exactly what to say about it. And it just kind of like flowed to this really amazing conversation. And so I kind of just wanted to bring it to the Chill Chat channel because, for one, I think that the conversation was absolutely amazing. And it's just so many different ways or just different perspectives that people have when it comes to a word or a situation or a scenario. And it's just so awesome to just be able to talk about it and just get ideas and just learn of other people's perspectives. And so there was a few things that really stood out to me in this conversation. And so one of the first things that stood out to me is being mindful of how you in general just approach a situation. And that can be in literally all areas. It can be for something that's really detailed. It can be for something that's in general. But how you approach a situation is really going to determine what kind of outcome you get. I know that we talked about in the Chill Chat conversation before about communication, and I just put out a video on effective communication. So if you haven't checked that one out, please check it out because I gave a really good scenario about effective communication. But we also talked about how when you approach a situation, you want to be mindful of the person that you're talking to and what kind of personality they have. I talked about that a lot kind of in the Married at First Sight reviews because a lot of the couples are having trouble with communication because they're having trouble simply with understanding the other person's point of view and the other person's perspective. And you have some who is really willing to they're always ready to just defend themselves instead of actually just hearing what the other person has to say. But if you approach a situation and you're like, look, my perspective is just as important as your perspective, whether I agree with it or not, you actually have a better opportunity to have a better outcome and even some resolutions from that situation. Another thing with that is, when, say, you are talking to someone that you don't really know, that is not for you to just be your full-blown self, because and that's not to say that you will be fake anyway, but you have to be able to gauge that person just like that person has to be able to gauge you. And if you are talking to a stranger as you would talk to like your best friend, in some cases it may seem very inappropriate, or in some ways it may seem too overwhelming or too overbearing, and then in some ways it's kind of like perfect. Wow, that person was actually able to talk to me like they knew me already. So in some cases actually is pretty good, in the other cases it's really hard for people. So just being able to really recognize who you're talking to and how you need to talk to that individual is going to be key. Another thing stemming from that is, when you know a person and how to talk to a person, you could adjust yourself to that situation. If I am usually around or communicating with people who have more of a quiet or calm demeanor, I would not go to that person being loud and being aggressive, because that person will receive nothing of what I'm saying. And their side of things, them being timid and quiet or calm, may cause me to assume something that may or may not be true. So you have to recognize who you're talking to, and I think that comes up a lot in relationships in general. When you're talking about friends, family, romantic relationships, a lot of people are not learning their partners, and because they're not learning their partners, they're not learning how to properly communicate with their partner. If you were in a conversation with someone and you notice that the person may get quiet whenever you start to cuss, when you recognize that pattern, it should generate in your mind that, hey, this person gets quiet every time I cuss. So if I really want the conversation to continue, I'm going to cuss less. So that's you learning your person. If you are in a conversation with someone and you notice that when they bring up a particular subject, they start to get timid or quiet, or you bring up another subject and they're talkative and they're just saying everything that comes to mind, you barely can shut them up. That's you learning the pattern of a person and learning the comfortability of a person. So the way you approach that person, if you want to get the most out of the person, you have to learn the person first. And so that's also a thing too, when it comes to approach. You approach a person the way you want to learn them, or the way you want them to respond to you, and the way you want to respond to them. And that all goes to deal with, when we talk about communication in general, you want to be mindful of your tone. You want to be mindful of your language. You want to be mindful of your stance. You want to be mindful of your body language. There's all these different types of things to take into consideration when you're talking to someone. But it's all about learning that person. Until you can learn a person, you really don't know the approach that you need to take with them, which comes with practice. So approach, that's another thing about approach, is it takes practice. You have to practice how to approach somebody. I would not per se approach my boss the same way I would approach my sister or my brother. Or I wouldn't approach my boss the same way I would approach my pastor. That's not saying that you're having multiple personalities or anything like that, but it's being mindful of the authority that they have or the different positions that they play in your life. My boss writes my paychecks. My pastor is my spiritual guide. My family is my family, or my significant other is my significant other. So you do have multiple hats that you wear, but not necessarily different personalities. No one should be confused about what is actually your personality and your character, because then you may need to talk to someone and figure that out, but it's just being mindful of how to approach somebody. And even when you're communicating with people, you will notice a difference in your language and in your speech. When I talk to my boss, I do tend to speak more professionally versus if I was talking to my mom or my sister or even a significant other or a partner. I wouldn't have that same type of demeanor, with even my pastor that I went with my boss, because for me personally, because my pastor is the overseer of me, he would know more personal details about me because I'm under his leadership. But another thing too is, and this is one thing that I had to learn in personal relationships, your partner should know you on a different level than your other friends. So that all comes with approach, how you approach someone and how you approach a situation, but through learning that person. So another thing that was really talked about that really hit home for me in the conversation was approach through motive. If you are approaching something, a situation, a scenario, a person with good intentions and good motives, you are going to get a better outcome than when you approach a person, situation, or scenario with a bad motive or negative intentions. So intent is really important when it comes to approach, because I can be saying something and my intent is going to be behind what I'm saying. So if my intent is to come across angry, I'm going to fulfill the purpose of coming off angry. If my intent is to belittle someone, I'm going to come across condescending. If my motive is to encourage someone, I'm going to come humbly before them. If my intent is to bring peace or bring calmness to the atmosphere, I'm going to come with a more humbled and calm demeanor. If I tend to be aggressive, if my intent is to be aggressive, I'm going to come with a more aggressive demeanor. But once again, that requires you learning how to approach a situation or a person or a thing, because some things you need to come with an intent of aggression, or you need to come with intent of peace. I don't think you should come with an intent to be demeaning or belittling, anything like that. But sometimes it is important for you to be able to express different emotions for different situations. But it's also about timing. It's about timing and when to do something and when to say something and how to say it. So that brings me to the next point about approach, is approach in the right timing. And I talked about that a little bit in the video that I did. I'm not sure exactly which video it was. I want to say it was effective communication, or maybe a few videos from the review. But I talked about a lot of the times knowing when to have a conversation and knowing where to have a conversation and knowing how to approach a conversation is going to be key. I mentioned before about how when I want to have really in-depth conversations, I want to be out. I don't want to be in the house. I don't want to be in confinement. I want to be out in freedom, in the fresh air, because it just gives about a different environment, and it just gives, it gives opportunity for a different perspective. I don't feel confined. I don't feel bound. I don't feel, another thing too about that is a lot of people view their homes as a safe place. And that's not to say that you can't have, in-depth conversations at your home and not be a safe place. But a lot of I found out about myself in general, the reason why I like to be outside of the home to have those difficult conversations, because sometimes I simply just don't know how they're going to go, but I also want to return back to my safe place. So you don't want to set yourself up to have those type of conversations when in your safe place, because you're going to want to return to that safe place sometime or another. I don't have very detailed conversations on the road, and I realized that because I used to have to take long drives. Even in my past relationship, we would go on drives all the time for particular reasons. And I'm a very quiet person in the car, and I reflected back on that because I was thinking about a conversation that me and my ex had about kind of an argument that we had about just how I am on the road. And I think it was maybe last week or the week before last, I began to reflect on me when I was younger, because I used to travel all the time. I used to travel to conventions and everything like that. And I had a flashback of almost every time that I went on road trips. I always had my headphones in and I was in worship mode. And I don't know if that's just because generally I was going on church trips. I would interact, sometimes, but most of the time it was me. If we were going, I was preparing myself to be in the service. And if we were coming back, I was reflecting on everything I got out of the service and just the things that I felt that God had spoke to me, and, just remembering, certain things about the service, and, just being thankful for how the service went and things like that. And so I've always been kind of a deep thinker on the road. And like I said, I would interact every now and then, but most of the time I was pretty quiet. Even my mom reminded me, because we went to Cleveland a few weeks ago. Me and my mom had traveled. And she was like, yeah, Renessa, you would get in that back seat, you would go to sleep, you would wake up for about an hour, be a little comedian, and then go back to sleep. And I was the backseat driver. My sister always wanted to be in the front seat. I was always in the back seat. And I was like, dang, I wish I would have just even remembered that, even when me and my ex were talking about it, and, just be able to give him some insight of even how it was before. But I didn't even remember that until a couple of weeks ago. And also too, I remember mentioning in a video before, is that I like taking drives. If I'm really stressed out, if I need a moment, or if I just got an argument with somebody, or I'm feeling some type of way, I would jump in my car. I would go for a drive and I would listen to my jazz music. And driving really helps calm me down. And so my safe place is in the car. That's crazy. I say that's crazy because my mom literally had made me get my license because I would not drive. I did not want to learn how to drive. When I was at a young age, I was like, look, I'm going to have a driver. I don't want to drive. No. And so it's kind of funny now that my safe place is in the car. And that's so crazy. That is so crazy. And so, like I said, just reflecting back on a lot of things, if I was to have a really in-depth conversation with somebody, or if I feel like the conversation can go negative, it would never be in the car. It would never be in the car. And so I don't know, it was just interesting. So really knowing like where your safe places are and having a designated place to have like those kind of, to approach difficult conversations or really important conversations, having a designated place. I remember also, I mentioned in a few videos before too, is that I watched this couple, Joss and Essie, and they referenced how they have Sunday reflections. And at first they did their Sunday reflections in their living room on the couch. But when it was time for them to have the self-reflection, it wasn't just like it was their living room couch, because they put a certain vibe into it. You know, when they went down for Sunday reflections, you know, they had either their tea or their coffee, a dessert or something like that. They had a plan, and they set it up in the way that they know that when we come to the couch at this time, it's for that Sunday reflection. Now I believe they go to the water or something like that, so that is now their conversation place. And it just allows them to be free, because they already set the precedence for that area in their home or at the water, for that to be their time to approach those type of conversations or those type of situations, or just checking in with each other on a deeper level. You know, like where I would talk to someone in general wouldn't necessarily be the same place I would go like super in depth into a conversation, because I feel like I would have to approach it differently. And I know that mine's kind of flip-flop anyway, because most people, they would rather be in the house to discuss those kind of really in-depth situations, where mine is opposite and it's outside. But I just feel like outside I don't have that chance to get really flustered and really to go to that aggressive tone of voice, because I am in public and I am trying to be mindful of those around me, and I don't necessarily want to get to that place to where I am being, you know, like loud and aggressive, things like that. But when I'm in my home, because I'm in my home, I have had times where I made it to that level of tone, you know, and, you know, that demeanor to where I did. And after that, I was just shut down, you know. And so really knowing yourself and knowing your safe place, or setting a precedence for you to be able to approach different things in different ways, it really will bring about a big outcome. Also, approaching things from the standpoint of facts over emotions. It really is important for you to approach something that you know. Like, I've been in situations where I can hear people, they just like talking, and it's like what they're saying is making no sense, because they don't know what they're talking about. And so they're trying to persuade someone to agree with what they're saying or accept what they're saying, but they don't even know what they're saying. So you're going to get a better outcome if you approach a situation with something that you know, or at least something that you're familiar with. When I work with young people, oftentimes when they would tell a story or a scenario, they were trying to like one up each other. And sometimes you can tell when it went from a legit story to something that they were kind of just making up as they go, or putting extra stuff in to make their story seem bigger, because of course teenagers do that. That's what teenagers do. And it was kind of like, why are you trying to add more to your story, or why are you trying to take away stuff from your story? If that story is your story, that's your story, and you don't have to have the same story as everybody else. Like, that's not what it's about. But people would try to literally one up each other in their stories, and you can tell that they're lying about it. You can tell that they're literally making it up. And then when they're called on it, they want to get either defensive or embarrassed and things like that. And it's like, why didn't you just tell the truth? Why didn't you just speak from facts? Just tell your story. I got my story. We still have two different lives. You know, even though our stories is different, it probably could have impacted us in the same way, or even close to the same way, or at least related in emotions or feelings or things like that. So you ain't got to one up nobody. You ain't got to add to your story. You ain't got to take away from your story. Honey, your story is yours, and it will forever be yours, and that's okay. But a lot of people, you know, they operate off of emotion instead of facts, and they get themselves in trouble because they start talking about stuff they have no idea what they're talking about. And so it is better to approach a situation based on facts rather than emotions. Another thing that really stood out in that conversation when it comes to approach is approaching something from the standpoint of growth. That was another thing that stood out. because mature meets maturity. Immaturity meets immaturity. And when you are able to approach something from a mature perspective, or even from a perspective of, look, I want to grow in this area. I know I may not know everything about this area. I'm kind of limited in my education about this, but I want to grow. When you approach something from the perspective of, I want to learn more, or I want more clarity on that, or I'm not trying to blame you, or I'm not taking blame away from me. When you go into it with the perception of growth and maturity, you're liable to get a better outcome, because what you are doing is you're setting the precedence for you to learn from the situation, not blame someone else for the situation. And it really teaches someone how to take personal accountability. And that's one thing, and that's another approach situation too, is from the standpoint of taking a personal accountability. A lot of people don't have that skill. A lot of people are not able to just take personal accountability, whether it be because of pride or ego or whatever the case may be, lack of understanding, not wanting to understand. But when you approach a situation from the standpoint of maturity, or at least growth, like willing to see where you're coming from. I may not agree where you're coming from. I might not understand where you're coming from, but if I can learn from the situation, all right, cool. If I have to take personal accountability for the situation, cool. If I'm the one that have to say sorry, cool. If I'm the one to be like, now look, look, hands up. I don't know what you're talking about. You're gonna have to give me more clarity. That right there, approaching a situation from that angle, will provide you with such a better response. I'm telling you, being in a conversation with someone who can't take accountability, or even watching people have conversations and you can clearly see that one person is taking more accountability than the other, is really mind-boggling to watch. And I said that in the Married at First Sight review because Lindsay and Mark specifically, I tend to see that Mark take a whole lot more accountability than Lindsay does, but Lindsay is always the one to shoot the shots. Like, she's always the one to complain about something, or she's always the one to be like, I feel like I need more of this, and you need to do more of this, and this, and this. And she rarely ever takes personal accountability, or she can never really admit to how what she has done maybe have affected the situation that now they're in, or now, the feelings that they're having, or the arguments that they're having, and things like that. But when you approach something from the standpoint of maturity and growth, it's like, okay, let's sit down and have this conversation. I made you feel this way, and you made me feel this way, and if there's a difference there, okay, let's attack the issue, not the person. And I feel like because there is a lack of accountability on Lindsay's end, and Mark is kind of taking off the accountability, when they come together, they're attacking each other instead of the actual issue. And when you approach something with, from the standpoint of attack, no one is going to get anywhere. That's literally what it's going to be. It's going to be attack and defense, and no one is going to get anywhere. So if you approach a situation from the standpoint that I actually can learn from you, and I actually may be able to take something away from your perspective, even if it's a different perspective on my end, say if I don't agree, at least have knowledge of another perspective that I probably would have never thought about if you didn't bring it to my attention. So being able to take something from the standpoint of growth is, you're going to get such a better outcome. There was so many things stated in that conversation that really stood out to me, but those are the main things that stood out to me when it comes to approach. I do plan to do more videos on just some of the words that I have conversations about, because like I said, we get deep, y'all. We be getting deep into those conversations, and it's just a way to be able to explore what's really in your heart and what's really in your mind. Like, it's really, like, it got to me. I remember it was maybe a few years ago, and even last year, I can say last year, standing up against some situations that I was in last year in my personal relationship, I realized that I did not know a lot about myself that I would have liked it to know before getting into a relationship. Just certain things that I thought I knew, but I didn't. And one thing about these cards that I do with the words and stuff like that, or just having deep conversations in general, which is why I started this Chill Chat channel, is you're really putting yourself in the position to really understand what you believe. and why you believe it, and why you think the way you think, and why you feel the way you feel. If you don't have these type of conversations, or if you're not in conversation with other people that have different perspective, how would you ever learn really why you are defending a certain thing until you're asked to talk about it? I've been in situations where they'd be like, okay, explain yourself. And sometimes I was able to give a really good explanation because I know why I believed it. And I was able to say it. And then there's other times I was like, dang, why do I think that? Why do I feel that way? And not even taking it from a standpoint that that's embarrassing, but it's just like, I need to understand why I feel the way I feel. I need to understand why I think the way I think, why I believe the way I believe, so I can actually have those type of conversations. It is nothing like engaging in a conversation when you know what you're talking about. And even when you're in a conversation with people that you may feel like, okay, their perspective is crazy, it's like, dang, I never thought about that, and that's really interesting. Maybe I need to think more into that. Not that you're, I mean, and sometimes you may change your perspective, but not as a persuasive kind of way that they're trying to get you to change your perspective, but being able to open your mind a little bit more, like being able to be more open-minded, and really just being able to have more knowledge about what other people are thinking and what other people are feeling around you. Like, that's productivity right there. Like, that is approaching something from an angle that's like, whoa. Like, when you really get into those conversations and people know what they be talking about, or even when you get into a conversation where people be having like aha moments, like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. Like, I would have never thought about that in that way. Like, it just brings about just a different conversation, different level of communication. And so I would encourage you to start having some conversation with those who you're around. If it is your significant other, if it is your family, start having those kind of conversations, because you'll be mind blown about the things that you didn't think about before, or from perspectives that was brought your way. And I'm telling you, the conversations will just go and you will be mind blown. But that is all I have for this video. And until next time, you guys, I hope that you do have a wonderful and blessed day. And I will talk to you later. Bye.